There we go. I have no idea why we have two streams going, but I also don't know how to end the second one. So I guess we'll just have two identical videos here. Whatever. I wanted to do this on StreamYard to make sure that we had the best audio video outputs going on in this video. And that's because I don't want anybody to miss anything. This is a very important topic. Thank you all for being here. This is, for those of you who don't know and maybe have just stumbled into this, this is the HVA-Chicks Coalition Free Saturday Training. We try to do it every Saturday if I'm not on an event or working in the field, but it has been few and far between this winter because I have just been so slammed. This one is a really important topic. Today, our topic is about improperly set thermostat parameters. Now, improperly set thermostat parameters can wreak havoc all over the system, whether it is in cooling or heating. It's just more typical that what is wrong, what is not set up correctly in the parameters is the backup heat. And so a lot of the time, a new unit will be installed or a new thermostat will be installed in the summer months. That's when we sell most units, right? Is when ACs break down and people are hot. There are far more warm climates than there are extreme cold climates in the US. And so we sell more units in cooling seasons, just how it is. And so when the problem is the emergency heat, the backup heat, typically we don't see any signs of that. It doesn't show any signs of that on the thermostat during cooling season. So when we get the call for weird voltage for our backup heat not energizing or energizing weird things that it shouldn't be, we get those calls this time of the year when people are just starting to need their backup heat. It's just now getting cold enough out. And because we haven't had any problems all summer, we don't typically think that the thermostat's the problem. Now, the other part of our problem and why it's often misdiagnosed is that we didn't have this problem 10 years ago for the most part. So now thermostats are capable of multiple heat, multiple cool terminals, energization. But before, if you had dual fuel, say you had a heat pump and a furnace, you typically controlled them separately. So now that we have this option to control them together, and I'm freezing up every once in a while, sorry guys, don't mind my face if that happens. Now that we have the option to control them together, thermostat companies, the manufacturers, came out with new ways of controlling it. It used to be you wired the thermostat correctly and the proper terminals would be energized. There was no way around it. That's just how it worked. Now, the wires matter because if the wires aren't on the wrong terminals, we have nothing to energize it with. We don't have any wires to energize, right? But the other half of that, that's only half the battle now. The other half of that is the switching relays within the thermostat itself. So the board in the thermostat now controls where our voltage is sent. So this confuses technicians who have been around a while because it used to be if you lost voltage to a terminal or to a component, it was because of the wiring. Now that's no longer true. And honestly, now that thermostats have been around a long time and we're wiring them the same way for the most part, less often is the wiring the issue. Almost every time it's in the parameters. And we will chase down voltage issues. We will drop terminals. We'll have terminals energized that shouldn't be. And that's always been a short or a wiring issue for us as technicians. So actually, the case is now we have this influx of new technicians, right? And the new technicians are better at technology than we are. And not only that, but they're starting out fresh. They don't know anything. And so they're learning all of this all together, right? And when it's an older tech or a tech who's been in the field a lot longer, it's harder to teach an old dog new tricks. Not only that, but these thermostat manufacturers changed all of this, right? Inside the thermostat doesn't look any different to us. And there's not been any bulletins put out. There's been absolutely zero training offered to us as technicians. They just tend to change all of these things within the thermostat and then not give technicians any way of knowing that. They don't offer us training. They expect because we're technicians that we should just be able to walk up to a highly technological piece of equipment and know how to work it. It's not the case. We need to be offered training. And as far as I have found in my extensive search, I haven't found any. Not from manufacturers, not from anybody. RTFM, absolutely. However, I'm going to tell you guys why RTFM doesn't help us as much as it should or as it has in the past with this particular issue. I'm going to go ahead and just go through the chat real quick. Say hi. Hi, Steve. Hi, Alex. Hi, Pug Boy. Hi, Bellini Castro. Hi, Jimmy. Hi, Danny. Danny, you should have my controls. I don't know if you're logged in under StreamYard, but if you want to be, that would probably be helpful, or log into YouTube, Jimmy or Danny, so that somebody can moderate the comments, just because I'll be at the board. I won't be able to get much of a handle on the comments myself. So if you guys could just moderate for me, that'd be great. What I have done here is created a board that's never been created before in the history of HVAC. And it has taken me over a week to get it right. And I'm still not sure if it's right. You guys are my guinea pigs on this class. This class has never been taught in the history of HVACR, and it'll probably only be taught by me for the next little while. So you guys are my first class that will get this. Next week, every single one of my, over the next 2 weeks, every single one of my companies that I teach will be getting this class as well. But you guys are the first. So bear with me if this isn't absolutely perfect, but listen. If you listen, you will understand this. I had a tech that last week called the line and troubleshot on our line for 5.5 hours. The first 2 of it was by herself because of this problem. And at the end of it, that problem was never solved correctly, and they now have to go back and solve it correctly. Today, she called with the exact same problem at a completely different unit. This time was a Nest thermostat, completely different place. And I was able to help her, walk her through and teach her and have her solve that problem in 5 minutes. 5 minutes after troubleshooting for 5 hours the last time. That is how important this is. So make sure that you're paying attention, and make sure this is where you get your questions answered. This is the live feed. After this, you can put a comment. If you're watching it later, you can put a comment in, and hopefully I'll see it, or one of my colleagues will see it, and we'll be able to answer your question for you, or you can ask it in the group. But as far as the best immediate, like watching this and then having questions that arise from this and being able to have them answered, the live is the place to do that. So make sure you put your questions in the comments. And as soon as I have time we will go through the questions as well. If I don't see it right off the bat, Jimmy or Danny will, and they'll make sure that they let me know that we have some questions. All right. So first things first, you guys won't be able to see the board super, super well just in the configuration that I have this right now, but that's okay. This is more of a guide for me to teach you rather than anything else. And I will be posting a picture of the board, a clear picture of the board with some notes, a little cheat sheet, if you will, in the HVA-Chicks Coalition group after this. If you're not in that group or you don't have Facebook, go join it if you do have Facebook. If you don't have Facebook, just shoot me an email to jennifer@hvachicks.org, and we'll get you the picture of the board so you can keep it as a cheat sheet. So what are we talking about? We're talking about voltage issues that arise and are very tough to troubleshoot in, sorry, Danny, one sec, guys. You're on StreamYard under you, right? So I don't kick you off. Yes, I'm under myself. And I'm on here twice somehow. So I don't think it'll kick me off. I didn't kick myself off. So, okay. So when we walk up to a unit this time of year, and we have a situation where electric heat or backup heat, dual fuel or electric heat, has an issue, and that issue seems to be electronic control. Okay. Let me just give an example, the most common example. The most common example is always going to be electric heat kit. Electric heat kit backup on a heat pump system. Okay. And we'll talk about the different forms of what gets this problem. But for starters, let's talk about that one. So say you walk up to a house, the call was emergency heat not coming on correctly, or unit is blowing cold air when the electric heat is supposed to be on. Works fine in heat pump heat, but when the electric is supposed to come on, it blows cold air. That's only one way that this can be a problem, but it's a common way. So when you walk up to that, if you don't know about this, you're going to be looking at what's going on with my system. Is my refrigerant charge low? And that's why I'm not able to heat properly, right? You're going to be looking at your refrigerant charge, at your airflow, at all these things. Why? Because the thermostat has been working all of cooling season. And now that we're in heating season, we know that sometimes we need a little bit different. We need to tweak that refrigerant charge a little bit in heating in order to get it to work. Or possibly my outdoor sensor is making it so that my electric can't come on yet. Maybe that's the problem, where we're chasing these things for hours and hours and hours. If we do have the good sense to go to the thermostat and start testing our voltage calls, right? We'll see weird things. And then we go, shit, it's a board. It's a bad thermostat. I must have a bad wire on something because this is energized, but this isn't happening. And this is how this problem exists. Okay. Now I am here to tell you that almost never is the problem actually a voltage issue. Rarely, rarely, rarely is the problem anything other than thermostat parameters. And it's not anybody's fault that we don't know that. The only people whose fault we don't know that is the manufacturers who went and changed the way that our thermostats are controlled without telling us. They just said, hey guys, guess what you can do now? You can control all these units on one thermostat. And we've given you that. We've given you this gift of multiple control on one thermostat. Here's all your 2 heat, 2 cool, your 3 heat, 3 cools. Enjoy. Without ever having, and the tech support line is ringing. Sorry, guys. Jimmy, if you can get it, go ahead. I just can't right now. So they never told us how to do that, though. And yes, they come with a booklet. And that booklet tells us which parameters to set on install. But what happens more often is we're walking up on a unit that was installed 6 months ago in the cooling season. Not only that, but not by our company, or if by our company, not by me. And so I assume an HVAC tech knows how to set the original parameters for a unit. Or it was me and I set it for exactly what it is. Right? I set this unit for exactly what it is to me. So I might walk up and install my unit, and then I come to the thermostat and I set my parameters. Well, the first one in the booklet says heat pump. I have a heat pump. So now I set my parameters for heat pump. It runs perfectly. Cooling is started up. Mrs. Jones is happy. She's got her little breeze on her. She's all good to go. Bye-bye. Now, 6 months later, when we finally need backup heat, Miss Jones, not only is her backup heat not coming on, but her indoor unit is blowing cold air. It's cooling. Well, that's crazy. That must be a voltage issue, or I must have a bad board. Wrong sequence of operations, right? Intuitive to an HVAC tech is the sequence of operations is wrong. It's my board. Wrong. Wrong, because this is counterintuitive to everything we've learned. This whole process is completely throw everything you know about control away. And you have to start over and learn this. So, oh, I thought this was oil-filled shit. I wish this was oil-filled shit. This is ghost shit. This is ghost shit. I just taught ghost voltage actually last year. This has something to do with ghosts, but we will get into that. No, we don't do any oil field, unfortunately, because if I had it to do all over again, I'd go back and join FIFO. Okay, moving on. So let's walk through what can happen. So let's start with what we're talking about. Okay, we're talking about 2 heat, 1 cool plus thermostats. You can have the parameters wrong on a 1 heat, 1 cool thermostat. You absolutely can, and we'll talk about that. But more typically, that's not what's happening. More typically, this is happening because you have multiple stages of heat, or you have at the very least 1 stage of backup heat and a heat pump, okay? So wiring does not solely control which terminals energize anymore. That's the basis of this whole class. Back when most of us went to school or learned from a lead on site, the wires controlled our thermostat. That's no longer true of 2 heat, 1 cool plus. Now, the thermostat itself controls where that voltage is sent. All the wires do is create a conduit, a path to that component that it's trying to energize. It does not choose when to energize it. So that's the basis of this whole class. That's the part I want you to always keep in your head. Every thermostat you walk up to, I want you to look at it and say, is this 2 heat, 1 cool plus? If yes, The wires do not control where my voltage is sent. So get the wiring right out of your mind. If the wires are set on the right terminals, get it out of your head, period. And most of the time it is set on the correct terminals. Now there's one big one that I will get to, but first I want to talk about what it presents as. Voltage issues. You can drop or energize terminals when you shouldn't. So in a situation where you have dual fuel and you have your compressor running and your gas heat, how many of you would have thought that was a board? I would, me. Wrong sequence of operations. It's the board. Not true anymore. In that situation, what's happening is you have it set to backup heat electric and not to fuel. So when we have an electric heat source for our backup heat and we have a heat pump, we need that heat pump to be able to switch flawlessly between electric and heat pump, right? And we do that using the thermostat. So the thermostat is what takes care of it. We have already set it up to take care of it on schedule due to temperature or whatever we're using for our baseline. And our customer doesn't have to do anything to touch it. And we need that to be true. The problem is when we set it up, it's a dual fuel and we set it up as an electric on accident. It's this easy. I'm in my parameters and it says backup heat on or off. I turn on. The next parameter says changeover and I skip it. But the default is already set to the changeover for electric heat because I didn't personally change it manually. And so what happens is it has to be able to energize Y and aux on an electric heat backup kit. What is going on here? Sorry, guys. I don't know. It just popped up on my computer, but okay. So we have to, in a situation where we have electric heat backup, we have to still energize Y. Because what is defrost on a heat pump? Defrost on a heat pump is swapping into cooling in order to heat up the outdoor unit, the outdoor coil. So in order to energize defrost, we have to be on Y. We have to have Y energized as well. So when we have Y energized, it's supposed to be in the background. And then what's energized in the foreground is our auxiliary, meaning the outdoor unit will not run unless it has to run into defrost. And when it does run into defrost, it will not push cold air out our indoor unit. It will simply energize the reversing valve, flip the outdoor unit into cooling to heat up the outdoor coil, and it will still run our auxiliary heat strips. But if you have dual fuel and you set it up like that, it's going to have serious voltage issues. You're going to have weird stuff like your heat pump compressor still running, maybe even in cooling while your gas is running. And that's because in a dual fuel setup, a true dual fuel, not electric backup, but a gas furnace, oil furnace, whatever you have for fuel. We'll talk about a gas furnace just for intents and purposes. It's the most common. When you have a dual fuel, you have to have Y off. You cannot energize the outdoor unit in any way. We are not switching seamlessly between outdoor unit and gas heat. That's not what we're doing in a dual fuel situation. In a dual fuel situation, when our furnace is energized, we want our outdoor unit de-energized completely. We don't need defrost. We're running gas heat only until that outdoor temp sets above where we need it. So that outdoor sensor will say, hey, it's too cold outside, and it will de-energize Y in a dual fuel situation and only energize W1. Now, in an electric, you will always have Y energized just in case it needs to go into defrost because the heat pump is running until that temperature hits, and then now the electric is coming on. We need to be able to go right back to that heat pump when the electric is no longer needed. So Y has to always be energized. So we have Y energized, but not impeding on the indoor unit. And we have aux energized only when the outdoor temperature point is below what we need for heat pump only. So if you set this up for this on accident, you will have all kinds of weird things happening. You will still have use of your outdoor unit. You will still be in cooling. You will have cold air coming out of your vents, even though you're running your gas at the same time. That can be an efficiency problem, right? Light bills skyrocket in that situation. And a lot of the time, because it's still warm, right? Your gas is running at the same time. So it might not be hot, but the homeowner doesn't necessarily notice that. They might just think their furnace isn't keeping up, right? It doesn't really ever hit set point correctly. It doesn't ever really, maybe we get like super dry air out of this thing just all the time. My house is so dry. These are the little itty bitty symptoms that your homeowner has because they don't know what's going on here. All they feel is the air is slightly cooler than it used to be when it ran correctly. So they call you in, you find the outdoor unit always coming on with your gas heat. You have cooling and heating, gas heating happening at the same exact time. That is going to be massive for efficiency, for temp rise, for delta T, for all of these things that we rely on to make sure that we're heating correctly. It's just going to wreak havoc. Now, that's only one situation. That's one situation where you have a dual fuel unit and you accidentally skipped one parameter in cooling season, mind you. That's when we do this usually. So you were in cooling season. You didn't care about the heat anyway. So you just skipped that little tiny one that said changeover. And skipping that little tiny parameter that said changeover meant that even though you have a dual fuel system, your OB was energized because it's supposed to be either O or B is energized in a heat pump with electric backup. Whereas in dual fuel, it's never energized in backup heating. We don't need a reversing valve when we're heating with gas. However, because you skipped over that changeover and didn't shut it off entirely, now it's calling the outdoor unit while it's heating in gas. Now, what about the opposite situation? In the opposite situation, if we have heat pump with electric backup and it's set to dual fuel, the opposite is going to happen. We won't have Y energized. Our outdoor unit will never come on, ever. Indoor electric heat will either always run or also won't run. And it depends on the thermostat. It depends on the energization changeover of O or B, depending on the manufacturer. Depends on so many things. But you will not have a correct running heat kit if you set it up for dual fuel on accident. And it's so easy to do it. One tiny little parameter that you either skipped or didn't know how to set, or say, I've done this 1,000 times. I don't need the little booklet. And you walk up and you just start setting parameters. Except that the ones you've done 1,000 times were heat pump only, or they were dual fuel. And this is maybe your first, second, or third that you've done in electric. And you know what? Come to think of it, every time I do that, it has issues, right? And that's because though you've done it 1,000 times, you haven't done this setup 1,000 times and you didn't know this about it. More likely, you're not going to set up a heat pump with electric backup as a dual fuel. You're going to set it up as a heat pump on accident. Why? Because you open the booklet. There are a few different pages, right? The booklet's like this big, first of all, our little yay big booklet, right? Thank you, manufacturers. Okay, so you got this little booklet and it's got 10 pages of choices, of equipment selection choices. And you're like, well, which one do I pick? Well, the first one says heat pump. I have a heat pump. Hey, I have a heat pump. I'm going to choose that one. So then you choose heat pump instead of heat pump with electric backup. And what happens to our terminals then? Y has to be on, obviously. Y for cooling, right? W1 has to be off because we control heating on a heat pump with the reversing valve. We don't need to call the reversing valve and call for heat. So W1 needs to be negated, completely off. The G needs to be set to wherever you need it for your performance data. Where does your unit say you need to set G to, right? And then OB needs to be on either O or B, depending on the manufacturer. And so what happens is we set it up as a heat pump. We have W1 off. We don't have aux turned on either. We're not using any of our auxiliary because we didn't know it had a heat kit, or we plugged it into the auxiliary, but we set it up as a heat pump. So now that auxiliary terminal is not existent. The thermostat doesn't know it's there because the thermostat thinks we have just a heat pump. So even though you put your wire on aux, it's not getting energized, period, no matter what you do. Not until you go back in there and you change it from heat pump to heat pump with electric backup. Now, this is so common that I get 5 to 10 calls a week on this. Some days when I'm on a busy Tuesday, I'll get 10 of these, 10 separate calls. Today alone, I've already gotten 2 that were this problem. Again, one of my girls, I walked her through something that took 5 hours last week and never came to conclusion in 5 minutes because it was this. It looks like she's dropping her Y terminal. That's what it looks like. She's not dropping her Y terminal. She doesn't need it. She had it set up for the wrong parameters. Whoever installed it, which was from her company, unfortunately, in this situation, a company I teach, they had installed it and set up the OB, the changeover, to O when it needed to be B. That's as easy as it is. So you can still set it up. Say we have a heat pump with electric backup, and we go into the parameters and we set it up as a heat pump with electric backup. Well, since that manufacturer in the manual, and this is the problem with the manual, Stephen, that manufacturer says in the manual, Dyke and Amanda Goodman, right? O, energize on O. But the thermostat needs it to be energized on B. It's the same terminal. It's the same terminal. You have a wire on that terminal. Usually it's orange even, but you don't need O. You need B. And your cooling would have run perfectly fine, energized in B, because you have a heat pump with electric backup. But because you've always known, put the orange wire on O and it energizes the reversing valve. And that's the extent of the knowledge that they give us. So now we have to relearn that you can either energize in O for cooling or B for heating. And sometimes with some thermostats, the Nest included, it doesn't matter what the manufacturer says. It's what the Nest wants, not the manufacturer. So now you have it set up exactly right in those parameters as a heat pump with electric heat kit, but you don't have O to energize, or you have O to energize in cooling instead of B energizing and heating. When you do that, your outdoor unit goes back over here. Your thermostat now thinks you have just a heat pump with no auxiliary. So what happens is, even though you have your wire on aux, even though you have it set up as a heat kit, even though everything else is right, you put that changeover on O instead of B, and now the thermostat's back to thinking it's only a heat pump with no electric backup. It will never energize, or it will energize while it's cooling. You'll get cold air out of those vents. This is all something that should have been given to us when our multiple heat, multiple cool thermostats were given to us. This should be something that's offered free online. In the booklet, there should be a troubleshooting guide for this, right? And yet we get none of that. All we get is figure it out on your own, spend 5 hours troubleshooting your thermostat. Oh, and this morning, my tech had called Nest. And Nest said, we did away with those thermostats. We're not providing any tech support on them anymore. And the customer had said to my tech, said, but you guys just told me that about the second generation, so I upgraded to a 4th generation last month. You told me I had to. And Nest says, yeah, we also did away with those. We're not offering support on any of our thermostats anymore. So luckily they called me. I was able to walk them through this. But if you didn't have anyone to call, you would keep seeing voltage dropping out on Y, voltage coming on Y when it shouldn't. You would see electric heat or aux never, ever, ever energized, or you would see it energized all the time. There are people out there right now today who are solely controlling their electric backup with a manual button on their app. And that's because whoever set up their thermostat didn't do it correctly. And somebody figured out that, well, if I just turn this button on, my heat kit runs, but it's running when their heat pump should be. There's another parameter that we haven't talked about yet. Let me see what this, do you need an outdoor sensor or can you use internet temp? I don't know what that is. Like some thermostats offer. Internal? Is that what you're asking? I think is that Danny? Danny, let me know what you were asking in that last question or whoever's logged into the YouTube. Okay, so the other parameter we haven't brought up yet, because this is so much more common. More commonly, you may think you have your thermostat set up for exactly what unit you have, but you don't. And usually it's not all of the settings that are wrong. It's 1. 1. Now there's another setting that isn't the changeover valve and isn't the heat kit yes or no, or gas backup yes or no, or none at all yes or no. It is your differential from when your break point should happen. And it's called your break point differential. In some thermostats, it's called outdoor lockout, right? So in dual fuel, we have to completely lock out our outdoor unit. So we'll talk about dual fuel for this moment on this one parameter. If we have a dual fuel unit, we need to completely lock out our outdoor unit when the furnace is running. So at what temperature? Normally they come default set to like 35 degrees, okay? Not until it drops below 35 degrees will it shut off the outdoor unit and run only the furnace. Now, this can be done by a series of dip switches too, and we'll talk about that because on some units, Daikin Amana Goodman included, there's a dip switch at the indoor board for this. But let's talk about this way for right now. On your thermostat, you'll have a lockout that is called the break point. So temperature differential break point, you'll see as your thermostat parameter. Most people leave it as default, which is 35 degrees. So when you come, say last night, the customer called in an emergency service call because their electric heat did not come on at all. Okay, so they were freezing to death last night. Their heat pump shut off, was not able to run, but their auxiliary never came on. So now you're there today. Last night it was 17 degrees. Today it's 45 degrees. So you're going through all these parameters, even if you know it's the parameters, which we don't. We don't even know to look there for the most part. Now, after this class, you will. And you'll go into that and you'll say, it's set to electric heat. It's set to all of my backup, how I need to. It's set to, or we were doing dual fuel. Sorry, guys. So it's set to dual fuel. It's set to lock out my outdoor unit when I have my furnace running. All of this is correct. Except last night, it was colder. And then you go in and you check your parameter. That's what's your outdoor unit lockout break point. And it's set to 35 degrees. Well, you're not going to be able to run your emergency heat, your furnace. You're not going to be able to run that right now today for testing purposes because the outdoor temp lockout, the break point, is cutting it out. So could be it was a little colder last night. Your homeowner maybe thought backup wasn't running. You get there today and you see backup isn't running. Shit, something's wrong here. Except backup's not running today because it's not cold enough outside. And you didn't know that parameter existed, or you left it at default because you didn't know what it meant. And so now you have no way to test that because you don't know to go into that parameter and turn it down or up, whichever you need to do. So then you figure it out, right? This is what I had to do today. This was one of the parameters that was messed up on my text call today. So we find that out. We set that outdoor break point to 44 degrees because it was 40 degrees outside instead of 30, which the homeowner had it set at the moment. So we set it to 44 degrees. Sure enough, on comes our electric heat. Can be the same with dual fuel, except that you need the outdoor unit completely locked out. What was happening to ours was it was energizing the outdoor unit and not allowing the aux to come on. After we switched it from O to B where it needed to be, we couldn't test it. It was acting like it still was broken because that outdoor temp lockout differential was set way too low. So we needed to jack up that lockout, that break point, turn it back on, cycle power. On comes the auxiliary all by itself. We turn that break point back down to 30 where the homeowner had it, and boom, it doesn't come on. We had it all completely right now. Two parameters could have cost her an entire day of troubleshooting and never, ever, ever come to fruition because it was the parameters the whole time. Two of them. So now in this situation with dual fuel, you need your outdoor unit to shut off, which means Y is not powered, right? So you need that to shut off at, say, 30 degrees outside, just because the customer happened to have it set to that. We'll do that, okay? So if it's below 30 degrees outside, the outdoor unit cannot run in heat pump mode. So the difference is with heat pump with electric backup, you still need Y energized because you still need to go into defrost when you need to. So if you don't set that temp lockout outside, that break point, to the correct temperature, what if you are, say your heat pump is only capable of heating at 50% capacity at 15 degrees outside, okay? And you have that set to 5 degrees because the heat pump says 5 degrees, right? It says that it's capable of doing 5 degrees and less and more. So you set it to 5 degrees, but really you're only heating 25%, 50% of your capacity at 15 degrees on that current model because your tech or whoever installed it didn't give you that information. And now you're the tech that's there trying to figure this all out. Well, now you have a massive gap between the time that your outdoor unit starts only going into defrost, only being powered for defrost, and the time that your electric auxiliary actually comes on. So now you have massive chunks of time that there's no heating going on, all because of one single stat parameter, the breakpoint. Make sure that the breakpoint is set correctly, not only for your climate zone, but also for your actual unit that you have. When you buy a thermostat, it's separate from a unit, typically, unless it's a proprietary system, you know, a Carrier Infinity or whatever. Even still, they're not set for that particular unit in that particular climate zone, right? So typically we buy a Honeywell thermostat or a Nest thermostat or an Ecobee thermostat, whatever, Sensi, right? And we buy that separately from our unit. We just put them in at the same time. If you don't set that breakpoint, your thermostat has no idea what unit you're putting it with or what its capabilities are or how low it can provide heating or at what capacity. You, the technician, the installer, are responsible for setting that breakpoint. Default will not work in this situation. You cannot leave it at default. That's another parameter issue we find a lot. Again, most common is going to be the changeover. You have it set to O and it thinks it's just a heat pump now when it should be set to B. Or vice versa, you can have it set to B and it needs to be O because the manufacturer of that thermostat and that unit want it to be O. So you could have that wrong too. You could have a blue wire, like this morning, there was a blue wire going to my reversing valve at the thermostat. So wouldn't you naturally think you need to energize B and not O? It's the same terminal. If I have an orange wire, I'm going to naturally think I need to energize O. And if I have a blue wire, I'm going to naturally think I need to energize B. In this situation, I had a blue wire for my reversing valve and I needed to energize O in cooling. You can get this wrong so easily. And when it happens, you see things like, okay, let's go with a dual fuel system. Or actually, let's go with electric backup just because it's the most common. Okay, so we have RC together, right? Either they're jumped or you have a C or whatever. You have R and C, and then you have OB. We'll say it's an orange wire, but we need it set on B, okay? RG is going to be energized however it needs to be. So we'll just, in this situation, say that it's energized all the time, okay? So we'll just put a wire to G from R, so check mark, okay? Now Y, this thermostat has Y1 and Y2, 2 stages of cooling. Now, in heating season, I need Y to not be energized. So should I pull the wire off it? My unit does cooling. Do I want cooling completely disabled to a point where when cooling season comes next, I have to go put the wire back on it? Absolutely not. So I have wires, or I have a wire at least. We'll say that we're not using Y2, but Y1, I have a wire on it, but I need that wire to not be energized. I don't want to have to keep every heating season going and pulling that wire off. I don't need cooling and I don't need a reversing valve when I have dual fuel. In this situation, I need Y energized for my outdoor unit to come on. So I'm going to leave my wire on Y. I'm not going to pull it off. I have to rely on my thermostat parameters to energize or not energize. Okay. And now W1, if we're going with electric, we have no W1, no Y2. We have W2 or aux. So on a lot of thermostats, W2 aux, W1E, right? It's the same terminal. We're just using it one way or another. So we need to, I did separate them for this purpose, but sometimes they'll be together. So remember that. With electric heat backup, we need no W1. And so many people put the W wire on W1. Now, you have a heat pump. So your OB, your B in this situation, because that's what we chose. That's what this manufacturer wants from us, okay? Your B is controlling your heat pump heat. So you don't need your reversing valve and your W terminal to call for heat. You just don't. So we don't use this W1 terminal at all. What we use, so picture this. These terminals right here are all it takes for heat pump heat, for the heat pump to reverse the flow of refrigerant and provide heat to the home, okay? Now, when we need auxiliary, we have to have that wired on W2 aux. On a lot of thermostats, smart thermostats now, that is one terminal, W2 aux. You can either have W2 or aux, but it goes on, the wire goes on the same terminal. Once again, another instance of our thermostat controlling where our voltage goes. We don't want it to W2 when we're in cooling, but we're not going to come and remove that heat wire. No way. We need the thermostat to do its job and energize each terminal for us. It used to be, it used to just be this. You put the wire on the O energizes when you trip the reversing valve into heating. Period. That's all it was. Now we have all of this to contend with because we're not going to go back to that thermostat and remove these wires in cooling season or add them in heating season. So we need these thermostats to do what they're doing. So in an electric heat situation, we need RC powered, usually jumped. We need our reversing valve on B for this instance. Sometimes it will be O, you guys, but it's not always O just because it's an orange wire, okay? It's not always blue or B because it's a blue wire. So our reversing valve has to be on B for this situation. That's all we need to control our heat pump, that and Y, which we have energized, okay? Now W1, not used, completely unused, no wire on it. We don't need it for nothing. W2, aux, has our heat kit on it. Now in our parameters, we have set all of these parameters up where we're using Y on, OB is on B, W1 is off, completely de-energized, not used, and W2 is set to aux, on. If we have our wires in the correct places and we have our thermostat capable of sending the voltage to those correct places and not to places we don't want it, we are going to run how we're supposed to. The problem is more times than not, we don't have those parameters set. So we go to a call and we're chasing and chasing and chasing. I get a call, Miss Jen, I've got, everything is perfect. Everything's wired right. And for some reason, my backup heat's coming on when I'm in cooling and it won't energize in heating. Why? Not because your wires are in the wrong place. 9 times out of 10, they're in the right place. But because you chose one parameter, maybe 2 parameters incorrectly or not at all. And because of that, you're now chasing a voltage issue that could take you days to figure out. And if you don't know this, you still won't figure it out. It'll be a loss, a complete loss. They'll call another company in. And that homeowner, honestly, will be lucky if that company knows either. This is something that is kept secret. This is something that is not offered training anywhere in the industry. It's not just like, oh, the union has training on this or only non-union shops have training. Nobody has training on these. Nobody. That's why tonight we have Tom Lawrence of Copeland, who created the Sensi Touch thermostat, right? One of my absolute favorite smart thermostats. But he's going to come on the radio show tonight and he's going to walk us through why all of this. Why is this what they chose or what they have to do in order to allow us to energize multiple heat, multiple cools? Why don't we have training on it? Why didn't they put out service bulletins to every shop or put them on, websites like ours or on HVAC School in order to give us, yes, NC all the way, Robert, exactly. But why did they not give us training? And also the disconnect between technician and owner and manufacturer is massive and it's growing every day. Maybe they didn't know we don't know. How's the manufacturer supposed to know what we as techs know if they're not in our world, right? But how are we supposed to know that they changed everything about their thermostats and how they control in order to give us multiple terminals if we're not in their world? So now we have to bridge that gap, and that's what the coalition is doing today. I'm teaching this so that you guys will never, ever skip over a parameter issue thinking it's a voltage issue. And then Tom is going to drive it home with, these are the exact parameters you have to watch out for. And we're going to do that too right now. So now we know what happens if a heat pump with electric backup is set up as a dual fuel or as a regular heat pump. And we also know that the most common is the latter. Heat pump is what it's set up at, even though it's an electric one. It's an electric backup heat pump. You cannot choose heat pump in the thermostat equipment selection if it has gas backup or electric backup, either one. You have to choose heat pump with electric or heat pump with gas or straight heat pump. You can't ever just choose heat pump and expect it to work. It'll work in cooling just fine. And that's why we're confused when we show up in heating season and we're like, this thing worked all summer long. What is going on here? That's because it won't affect the cooling season. It only affects whether we're changing our reversing valve. In cooling season, we either don't need to energize our reversing valve because it's already energized, or we have it set to energize. We know if we, install a unit, install a thermostat, and it's not running on startup. We know that. We go into the parameters and go, oh, I had it set, to B when it should have been O. That is set completely fine in cooling. But now we have to energize B in order to get our backup strips to come on. That's the thing. In electric, we have to be able to still use our outdoor unit. So instead of shutting it completely off, we're energizing B, which energizes Y. Okay? Whereas in dual fuel applications, we're not energizing shit. Pardon my French. All we want is that gas unit running. And then when it is warm enough for the heat pump, it shuts off that gas unit, same way it shut off the heat pump the first time. And it runs the heat pump instead. They are not working together. They are two separate systems called on and called off by the same thermostat. Whereas a heat pump with electric backup is one unit working simultaneously to be controlled by the same thermostat because it's one singular unit. We have to be able to separate those two things. And then also a standard heat pump that has no backup cannot be set up for dual fuel. You can't set it up as a heat pump and run it in dual fuel because how are you controlling your furnace? Even though they're not running at the same time, you still have to be able to call one on and one off. So we have to make sure that when we go into equipment selection, so start to finish, okay? We walk up to our thermostat. This is on install. We'll talk about first, okay? On install, we walk up to our thermostat. We set every parameter in the booklet for exactly what it is. We don't stop and pause on page 1 because it says heat pump. We scroll through each page in our little booklet. Okay, what exactly do I have here? And some of them will have different parameters for a 10 kilowatt or a 15 kilowatt or a 5 kilowatt. So that's another thing you have to watch out for. You could have all of this 100% right, and it's still not capable of energizing your heat kit because it's not set for the right size heat kit. Crazy. It's crazy how much these parameters matter. So now you walk up, you set it for electric or for heat pump with electric heat backup, 10 kilowatt strips. Okay. And then you set, that's your equipment selection. Okay. Now you still, even though you chose that, that doesn't automatically mean that the thermostat knows when to energize and when not to. So if you just leave it at that, if you just select your equipment and walk away, this is going to happen. It's going to send voltage where it shouldn't and not send voltage where it should. So instead, you have to keep going through every single parameter. I don't care if it has 300 parameters. You do not skip one, not one on install. The next one is going to be something like backup heat, choose. Even though you just selected heat pump with electric backup, it still needs you to choose how many kilowatts your electric backup is. Now you skip that. You don't have enough power going to the terminal to energize your 15 kilowatt heat strips. You're still in the same boat. You're energizing things that shouldn't and not energizing things you should. So we need to go to the next parameter. The next parameter, we choose what our heat kit is. The following parameter is going to be, when do you want us to change over? Because it's electric with a heat pump, it's seen as one system. We need the outdoor unit to still energize. So if you skip OB, that will leave OB terminal off, as it should be for dual fuel. So now you did everything right up until that step. You selected the correct equipment. You selected the correct heat kit. But now you've left your reversing valve off. It's only capable of running and cooling now, or whatever was energized, cooling or heating at that moment. So it's only capable of that. It's not capable of changing over the reversing valve now. Now it's back to running like a heat pump, or not even a straight cool, really, even though you set up the correct parameters before that. So now you go to that one, you choose OB selection, changeover selection. Look in your booklet. Does it want you to energize on O or B, right? Choose the one that you're supposed to have. Now, you not only have the correct equipment, the correct heat kit, you have it set to keep that outdoor unit running, further verifying to the thermostat that this is what we have and not this. Now the thermostat knows I have to keep my outdoor unit on only to use for defrost, which means I'm going to shut my indoor unit off, allow the indoor unit to only run on heat strips, and the fan will run on energized heat strips as well. So my G at this point is going, if my outdoor unit's in defrost, my G is going to be energized with aux, right? It's not only going to run when it's in cooling, and it's not only going to run when the outdoor unit is in heating. Now it's going to run anytime my aux is on while my outdoor unit's in defrost. My outdoor unit comes out of defrost, my G is still running because my aux is still on. Boom, taken care of. We're lovely. So now what happens if you do all of that, okay? And you come to the next parameter, which is breakpoint. And you leave it at whatever the default is. You leave it at a 30-degree break point, but for testing purposes, it's 40 degrees outside right now. So you can't test whether this is going to come on and off on its own. All you can test is whether it comes on and off manually. So now you have to jack up that break point in order to test this. Is this happening on its own? After you do that and you verify that it is capable of coming on and off on its own when the temperature reaches a certain degree outside, you also have to remember to go back in and set it back down, because you don't, if not, you're going to get a call back because the electric heat's been working all day and it's 45 degrees outside. So many parameters, you guys, that are so important. So important. Okay, so now you've set all of those parameters. And now still, you're getting 24 volts to Y in heating, but you're getting nothing to auxiliary. Well, damn it. What now? What does that mean? Something completely counterintuitive to what's happening. What's happening is that you still need your Y. Your Y being energized isn't a symptom. It's a symptom of being a heat pump with an electric heat kit. That's all. Your Y should be energized. You should have 24 volts in heating or cooling if you have backup heat. Now you won't if it's not backup heat. If it's a standard heat pump, you won't have your Y energized in heating, right? You'll have your W energized in heating. Okay, this isn't that though. This is a completely different system. This is a heat pump with electric backup. In that case, you have to have Y energized, but you have to have your reversing valve set to change over correctly, or your auxiliary won't come on. Your auxiliary terminal does not get its signal until the reversing valve is in the correct position. So if you're set to O and you should be in B, and that's the only thing wrong, you need to go back in and flip it from O to B. That way, after your reversing valve calls, your auxiliary will come on. Because if not, it stops you right there. You will not be able to move forward with your auxiliary. What do we got on the screen? Isn't the equipment manufacturer who determines the correct setting to energize a reversing valve or thermostat? Yes, so technically, absolutely. Realistically, some thermostats don't give a shit. You know how many Daikin amount of Goodman that says energize O in cooling? I have had to go in because of the electric heat kit not coming on. I had to switch it to B anyway. Doesn't even seem to be a rhyme or reason to it. It's the thermostat as far as I'm concerned. Yes, in theory and in what we're told by all manufacturers and the manual, it's whatever your equipment selector says that you should have. However, I have still had it be wrong many, many, many times. This is not like a rare thing or a glitch thing. Like, this is common. Depending, like some Ecobee thermostats, I think I've had it happen probably most commonly on the Ecobee thermostats, but it happens in Nest, it happens in Sensi, it doesn't matter. Ecobee does not have a good grasp on how they control these settings on their multiple heat, multiple cool. What happened is everybody came out with a multiple heat, multiple cool thermostat, and Ecobee was behind. So they didn't have the technology necessarily, but they forced it and they put it out there. I don't know the reason, and I am trying to get a straight answer, but good luck with any manufacturer as to why your manual will tell me to energize B and I've got to go back inside and flip it to O because it's still not working. And there doesn't have to be a rhyme or reason to it, guys. If it works, it works. So if we have it set in B because that's what the manufacturer says, and we do this and the same thing happens. It doesn't swap over, doesn't change our reversing valve in order to power our auxiliary terminal. If that's the case, it doesn't matter why. Go in there and swap it. The manufacturer was wrong. End of story, right? End of story. Because after you do it, and I've had this happen on an EcoWare unit with its own proprietary thermostat. Literally, the first one I ever saw this on myself in my own experience, Val and I had set up, a domestic water only boiler, an EcoWare, two separate EcoWare dual fuel systems in this mansion house. And we did everything right. All the parameters were correct. And I talked to my buddy at EcoWare. I said, these strips will not come on. I don't know what to do. I can't get my air handler to turn on in auxiliary. I don't know what to do. He walked me through every single parameter and he said, I don't know, let's just try swapping that changeover from B to O. We did it. Boom, everything came on. It's been running for 5 years ever since. Perfectly fine. Even though EcoWare says, only energize our units in B. Yeah, it's a problem. And technically it should be the manufacturer's choice. But if the manufacturer's choice doesn't work, just go change it. Don't hem and haw. Don't put yourself in the place where the customer is taking that out on you. Has nothing to do with you. It's the manufacturer's fault. All you did was know better. That's it. So case in point here, since we're almost out of time. Do we have another? Do you run into this issue with Sensi thermostats? I do, Robert, because it's not a proprietary issue. It's not a manufacturer issue necessarily. What it is they all work remotely the same. So like in order to have this problem happen, you have to not have a full understanding of backup heat thermostats in general. So yes, it can happen on any multiple heat, multiple cool thermostat, and it's not the brand that's the problem. It's just that's how multiple heat, multiple cool thermostats are controlled, and that we don't know about it. We don't know how to set them up properly. So now that you've taken this class, chances are you won't see it on any thermostat, or you'll see it and you'll know exactly what to do. Okay, I know where to go from here. I have, weird voltage call on R and on Y and W. I must have a parameter wrong because now it's controlled by the thermostat settings and not by the wiring. So the chance of you coming across this at all are only going to be if somebody else installed it after you took this class, because otherwise you took this class, it's in the parameters. It's not a wiring issue. You're not losing voltage. Your terminals aren't broken. Your thermostat's not broken. It's the parameters are not set up correctly. Why should OB matter to energize your electric heat strips? Why? Because the outdoor unit has to be on, or in dual fuel, if you have that one little parameter wrong in dual fuel, it has to be off. So you could have it off trying to get the auxiliary to call on this unit, or you could have it on trying to get the auxiliary to call on this unit. Again, not manufacturer specific, not even necessarily a manufacturer problem. It's not a problem. The problem is we don't know how to set it up. That's the problem. So yes, use your Sensi thermostats. And again, come to the show tonight because at 9 p.m. right here on this channel, Tom Lawrence from Sensi is going to be here talking about Sensi thermostats and how they control multiple heat, multiple cool. So I definitely highly recommend Sensi. They've been awesome to the coalition too. They take good care of us. So Sensi thermostats, I've never had a problem that was manufacturer specific with it. The only problem I've ever had with any two heat, two cool is myself. Me not knowing this information is what causes the problem. Now, last thing that I kind of want to I'll just go over the key takeaways from this. Okay, real quick. Key takeaways from this are that you don't have a voltage issue. You don't. I don't care what your terminals are energizing or de-energizing. I don't care how weird it is. It's not a voltage issue. The chances of that are so low. If it's on a straight heat pump or a straight furnace or a straight boiler that you're having weird call issues, still go into the parameters and see if you have it set up for backup heat, because you might, even though you don't have backup heat. That's common. Yes, in that case, I will give you 30% chance that you actually have a voltage issue. If it is a single stage, single heat unit, single heat cool heat or heat cool unit, I will give you a 30% chance it's a voltage issue. Otherwise, it's not one, period. It's not a voltage issue. Nest thermostat can energize its backplate and send voltage to any terminal. Any terminal. I've had it cook an entire compressor because it chattered my contactor for so long without even being powered that it just kept drawing that amp draw from my compressor, would not shut off. I've had that happen. You could have a voltage issue on a Nest thermostat, but it will not present this way. It won't present this way. If it's a backup heat unit and it has a voltage issue at the thermostat, the issue is the parameters. The issue is not the voltage, period, or the wiring or anything else. I mean, yeah, you could have your wires in the wrong place, sure. But if you have your wires in the wrong place, I can promise you have your parameters set wrong. If you're at a point where you're still hooking up wires incorrectly on a thermostat, then you definitely don't understand the parameters because you just don't even understand the wiring, right? If you understand wiring a thermostat and you have this issue on a backup heat unit, the issue is your parameters. They have to be set correctly. They have to be set correctly for that unit. So I don't care how many units you install. If you install a different unit, a different thermostat, a different BTU output even, this could be different. You have to do it. You have to focus on that parameter setup every time, not just, okay, this is part of my routine. This is what I do all the time. I know what these parameters should be on. Every time you have to focus on the booklet on these are the parameters I need. And if you have a problem, you need to go back to the parameters and not go chasing voltage issues, not go chasing call issues. Your call is wrong because the parameters aren't allowing you to call what you should be, or they're calling shit you shouldn't be, right? So it's always the parameters. That's why I named this class. It's the freaking thermostat parameters, because it is every time. I'm talking 10 calls a day. It's the thermostat parameters. The only time it's not the thermostat parameters is if you have a sequence of operations, like on a gas furnace. Say your gas furnace it's getting its call and like you're losing it at the gas valve. Well, that's not thermostat parameters. That's a sequence of operations issue, right? Tripping out on a safety, either on a cooling or heating unit. That's not a parameter issue. It's running. The problem is the parameters. If your energization to your call is wrong, if you have two things running that shouldn't be at the same time, if you have something that's not running, not kicking in when it should be, like your backup heat, or flipping back into regular heat pump mode isn't happening when it should be, your auxiliary is running all the time, those things are always the parameters. And if you're not sure, if you are not sure, you all have 100% free 24-hour access to the HVA-Chicks tech support line. Our people in the tech support line that work for the tech support line that volunteer for us are taking this class today. All of them. All of our staff is taking this class today or tomorrow. Every single one of them. And every one of my companies that I teach 8 companies, all of them are learning this over the next 2 weeks. That is how important this is to me. I cannot have my tech support line chasing down 5-hour calls that have a 5-minute fix any more than I can have all of you out there with no access to training on this issue that we didn't cause ourselves in any way. This is my gift to you. Make sure you use it. Robert says, I was told that Nest is known to chirp compressors when they're installed without a C-wire. Yes, I have seen that in the field. I've seen it when they do have a C-wire, and I've seen it when they have a fast stat adding a C-wire. Nest's problem with chirping the contactor or with sending voltage places it doesn't belong is internal. It's not necessarily from the wiring, and it's not necessarily from the unit that you have at all. What it is the Nest itself is poorly made. Nest 100% agrees. Okay. The Nest is poorly made. So that back plate that you hook your little, showy, funky thingy, your little thermostat that you actually use and touch screen and all that, you pull that off the wall and you get the back plate behind it that all your wires are hooked into. That back plate somehow conducts energy. It conducts electricity. So it will conduct without a call. If your R is always powered, whether you have a C powered too, or it's running on batteries, it has the ability to literally just surge the entire back plate. Every single one of these terminals gets a little bit of voltage. And when it does that, it can constant run your compressor without a call for cool. That's what happened to me. I had no call for cooling. My Nest was just giving that little bit of voltage on the Y terminal long enough for it to continuously try and fail to start my compressor. that many times trying to grab all of those amps it takes to start off at 60 hertz killed my compressor, melted the entire plug. All of the wires that were like touching the compressor itself melted to it. It cooked the internal overload. Like, Nest is very, very, very bad. Yes, Nest. Jimmy says Nest makes a great paperweight. That's 100% true. Never trust a Nest. Even today, the woman had a thermostat ghost that we were working on. This was wrong. The OB terminal was wrong, but once we got it right, it still wouldn't energize that terminal. So what we did was we flipped it back and forth several times. OB, OB, OB. We got it to come out of it. She ended up having a ghost in her thermostat that didn't cause any damage. Luckily, 9.5 times out of 10, if you were in a situation where the Nest was sending power somewhere it shouldn't be and you had to go OB, OB, OB to get it to stop, 9.5 times out of 10, it caused damage. You need a new thermostat. This woman, we didn't end up having to put a new thermostat on the wall, but I was on speakerphone with her and my tech saying, we're getting rid of this. This is going to happen again. And we got lucky as hell this time. We're not going to get lucky as hell next time. Get rid of your Nest thermostat. Anytime you guys walk into a place, especially if it's multiple heat, multiple cool, and it has a Nest thermostat on the wall, one of your sales options is a new thermostat. It's public knowledge. They can go right on Google and type in, why are Nest thermostats bad? And 20,000 Reddit threads will come up and a bunch of bulletins from Nest saying how we're not going to provide tech support anymore and get rid of your Nest thermostats because we're putting all of our money into, Nest Home now. I went and got the Nest fire alarm because I am severely, severely deaf in my left ear. And now I'm losing my hearing in my right ear as well. So it's a problem. I can't hear certain tones, including a fire alarm. So we went and got the Nest one because it lights up and because it's a voice. It says, there's a fire in quadrant 1, right? Instead of just like blinking and beeping. And so we went and got it and hooked it to our Google Home. And not a week later, the fire alarm had shorted itself out on the backplate terminals. Insane. If a fire alarm can short itself out when it's literally just a direct 24-volt signal, nothing else. It doesn't need a switching relay. It doesn't need to change from terminal to terminal. It's literally direct 24-volt power. If that can short itself out in not even a week, what do you think these thermostats are made out of? Get rid of them. The Sure Switch from Copeland would be a great install to prevent chirping. Yes, it would. The other thing is this is more common on inverters. Not this, what we're talking about. The Nest problem is more common on inverters. And that is because inverters have DC power and because they're running more often, because they're not straight on, straight off compressors and they're able to modulate up and down. They just run more often. So the chances of taking a surge or chirping the contactor while it's running are just higher because it's running more often. So always put a surge protector on your inverters. Never sell an inverter unit without a surge protector. And if you are there for maintenance, if you're there for a service call, you don't leave there without selling that customer a surge protector, hopefully a voltage monitor as well. And if you have an inverter, you want to definitely recommend they replace their Nest. You don't want them to have a Nest with an inverter, not by any means. Google discontinued support for Gen 1, Gen 2, but Google is still mining data from the homeowner. Yes. And they are still technically, publicly, they are still allowing tech support for the Gen 3 and 4, except that they made this customer today switch to a Gen 4 for that reason. And when my tech called Nest before she called me, Nest told her she was on her own. We're not providing tech support for the Gen 4 anymore. So they are lying to the public and they're telling this woman had called with a problem with her Gen 2 and they told her, oh, we don't provide support anymore. You have to get a new thermostat. You have to upgrade. So she did to a Gen 4 a month ago. Today, she has a problem with her thermostat. She has her tech call them and they tell the tech, we're not providing for any of them anymore. Get rid of your Nest. Insane. We can't trust the manufacturer anymore, you guys. And that is because of a lot of things. But one of the things is greed, right? We are the ones that are the face of that thermostat. Even if I didn't sell it, me being in that homeowner's home, being the one that she trusts to be a specialist enough to fix her problem. If I don't know this, how can I fix it? And is she going to go yell at Nest No, she's going to yell at me. I'm the tech that's in the home that's supposed to know what I'm doing. Nest didn't teach me how to do this. Sensi didn't teach me how to do this. No thermostat manufacturer taught me how to do this. All they said was, hey, come buy my product. I've got 2 heat, 2 cool. Now you can control the whole house with one thermostat. Isn't that so awesome, techs? And we're like, take my money, right? I love this. Take my money. And then we go set it up like a regular thermostat because they don't tell us no different. And then they tell us, okay, this unit has to energize on O instead of B, and we flip it and it works. And it doesn't work the way they told us to do it. They're lying to us. You have to be able to learn from each other more than you learn from anybody else. Your experience, my experience, each other's experience, that's how we learn in this trade, not to listen to the manufacturer, for sure. However, when you have a manufacturer that wants to bridge that gap, you have to let them. And tonight, Sensi reached out to us, not the other way around. Sensi reached out to us to say, we never thought of the fact that you guys didn't know how to do this. And why didn't we? You know, why did nobody offer training to you guys on this when you're the ones installing them, not us, you know? And so they said, let us come on your show and we'll give you guys every tip and trick in the book that you could possibly need for doing this right. And when I tell you this is #1 callback this time of year, imagine if you learned this so well that you didn't have a single callback in that. Your company might not have a single callback for a month if we can get a good handle on this. So make sure. No, that's not true, Jimmy. Jimmy says just get a Honeywell Wi-Fi stat and solve all your problems. Not true. Controlled the same way. This happens on Honeywells more often than any other thermostat because there are more Honeywells. No, that does not solve all your problems. Every single piece of what I just taught you happens every time you set up a 2 heat, 1 cool or more on a Honeywell thermostat. Every time. Those parameters look like shorted terminals. Those parameters look like the wrong voltage or voltage drop or the wrong wiring, right? They're not. It's literally 100% in those parameters. And there's no way out of that. We can't diagnose it as something it's not. It doesn't matter how many wires we replace. Doesn't matter how many times we rewire something. It's not going to work if we don't get into those parameters and fix it. So a lot of the time we can say, you need a new thermostat. And then we put the new thermostat on the wall and the same thing happens because we didn't know how to set up the parameters the first time and we still don't now, right? So now we're in that same exact boat. Wiring was correct the whole time on all of them. And they had a standard Honeywell T4, you know, our fault, not Honeywell's, not anybody's. It's our fault for not knowing. It's Honeywell's for not teaching us, that's for sure, but not for the way they make their thermostats. The way these thermostats work is correct. It's good. It's right. It's exactly how we have to do it. There is no other way, but we have to be taught. And if we aren't taught, we have to find a way to teach each other. And that's that. Like, I'm here, I'm doing it. If you guys learn it from me, go teach 100 other techs, and then those techs will go teach 100 other techs. And what do we need a manufacturer for? Just make our thermostats and shut up about it, right? We got this. So that is all of your responsibility. That is your homework from Saturday Free Training, is that every single thing you ever learned from me or from any member of the HVA-Chicks Coalition or even your own experience has to get passed on. You don't have a choice. Once you learn it, it's your responsibility. You cannot say, I didn't know because I was, pleading ignorance. And you can't say my helper didn't know because he didn't ask. All you can say is, I knew this information and I didn't pass it on. That's my fault. Or I knew this information and I did everything I could to pass it on. And if you do that, we don't care what the manufacturers do. We've got this all under control, all by ourselves. So if you get into a jam and you're not sure which thermostat parameter it is, you've gone through it 10 times and you're like, I know it's one of these, I just don't know which one. Or do I know if this is thermostat parameters? Maybe I don't remember if this unit, could be affected by this problem. Call the tech support line. 856-390-4055 for all of you. 100% free, 24 hours a day. Technicians only. You cannot call if you're a homeowner. We will ask, so don't even try us. But all technicians across the globe get to use this tech support line for free. And there is no time that we will refuse to help you. If you're not sure about this, you will not be made to feel dumb. You will not get let us call you back in a week. Hopefully you're still on site living with your homeowner at this point, right? Like Lennox or Carrier. We will immediately call you back, or we will answer immediately and you will get the help you need without having to feel crappy about it. So just give us a call. There's no excuse. Now that you've taken the class, you have no excuse, but having the class and a direct line to Jimmy or I, you definitely don't have an excuse. All right, guys. Thank you so much for coming. I have kept you far too long. I appreciate all of you coming here because what sets techs apart from other techs is their drive to learn. Nobody's forcing a single person to be here, except for me forcing my staff to be here. But nobody's forcing the rest of you to be here. And I appreciate somebody who is not only willing to learn, but interested and invested in learning and showing up and actively seeking out places to learn this stuff. Now that you know this, you will not ever have a callback on this problem ever again, but it is the most common callback problem there is. So keep an eye out for it. Remember, it's never the voltage. It's never the wiring. The wires aren't wrong. It's none of that. It's in the parameters. Always go into the parameters first. You will save yourself so much time. And if you need us, give us a call. Thank you, guys.